Hey, what's happening? Welcome to the Pleasure Points podcast. I'm your host, James Rohr. Thanks so much for being here. I'm coming to you live, not live, but I'm recording in Chicago. That's why the sound quality is not quite what it used to be. I didn't travel with all of my gear up here, hanging out with Jen and Wyatt and visiting my mom and all the things. So we're having a great time, and I missed you guys, missed last week, and excited to be here and check in with you. So let's just go ahead and dive right in. All right, so we're up here in the Midwest, and it's really interesting seeing the difference between Indiana and Chicago and Illinois, because Indiana feels almost like not much has happened. So that's I was with Wyatt in Indiana maybe a few weeks ago, and right when things started opening up again, and it was like there was no problem. Everybody was out and about, and there was like traffic on the road for the first time like that I'd ever seen in months. And now we're here in Illinois, and it's much more guarded, much more sort of like a lot of the businesses are still closed. But we've been venturing out into the world, wearing masks and going out to Target and trying to support small businesses. But unfortunately, this assault on small businesses that's happened, there just aren't that many that are open yet. And we're just out trying to, do the things. So hopefully you are listening to this and you're safe and your loved ones and everything is good. It was pretty funny, because Wyatt spent most of the time with during Corona time with his mom and his grandparents, her parents, and his aunt. And, sometimes those of you guys that are divorced, can understand that sometimes you hear your child say something and you're like, oh my God, what have you been listening to? What's been on the air at their house? And the first day that I had Wyatt and we were going to go out, and my mom is explaining that he's got to wear a mask. And he says, well, I don't want to wear a mask. He goes, masks don't work. And it was such a definitive statement from a 7-year-old. And he's like, masks don't work. And then he starts telling me the story about, I don't know, some hairdressers and, they had COVID, but then they weren't wearing a mask and none of their clients got sick. And so, or maybe everybody I forget the details of the story, but he had like a full on example for it. And I was like, dude, you have to just wear the mask. Like that's what we're doing. We're going to the stores, like just put it on and be done with it. And we sometimes play this game called Exploding Kittens, which is a card game. The name sounds terrible, but Wyatt loves it. And one of the cards in this card game is if it's like an action where you have to draw cards, or someone's gonna take a sneak peek in the deck, you can drop a nope card, and this nope card means that they can't do whatever they wanted to do. And so Wyatt and I were out at Home Depot yesterday, and he says to me, he goes, Daddy, can I play a nope card on the government for wearing a mask? Because I don't want to wear this mask, and I'm going to play a nope card. I was cracking up, and then he says, well, but it's the government, so they can probably just like make their own nope cards that beat all of my nope cards. And if that isn't the case for smaller government, I don't know what is. That seems like a pretty good explanation for libertarian policies. And it's just funny listening to it, because it's like this little anarchist is being raised over there, and I'm not upset at all. It's like I like that he's questioning the popular narrative out there. I think that's helpful in every capacity, at least to have that critical thinking and to say, okay, what am I being told to believe? And what's the research, what's the science, what's the understanding? But that's a great skill, is to be able to navigate those waters. But, being able to explain the flip side of like, well, this is why other people think masks are important. This is why this is the rule right now. And then we get to make a choice. So we can, wear the mask and go into these stores, or we can not wear the mask, or, I suppose you could say you have some medical condition that keeps you from wearing it too. But yeah, anyway, it's super interesting. Like, I took him to get his haircut today, and they measured our temperature and had us like sanitize our hands before we came in. And it was like already such a back and forth to get him to even, get him in the car to go get his haircut, because he's enjoyed his shaggy hair. And I was like, dude, we're not going to like shave your head. It's just going to trim it up a little bit. And then by the time we actually get there into this mall, the mall was totally like almost empty. I mean, some of the stores were like, shuttered up, like they're looking for new tenants. But a lot of it just wasn't open. I had this, it was just a strange feeling of like, wow, this would be what it was like if there was some sort of epidemic that just like wiped out 90% of the human race. And, and we have all these huge malls and empty stores or stores where there's just like nothing happening. It's really bizarre to walk through an empty mall. It was just strange. So anyway, we get to where he's getting his haircut, and before they let us in, they scan our temperature and have us sanitize our hands. And I was like, oh my God, like it all happened so fast that I was just like, am I even okay with this? Like I thought I read their COVID preparations on their website, and I didn't see anything about taking our temperature. But it's like, do you opt out of that? It's like, if you've got nothing to hide, like there's, you're not trying to hide a fever. So like, there's nothing to be afraid of. But is this the beginning of a very slippery slope? I don't know. I just got, I've seen some notifications from some acupuncturist colleagues of mine, and they're doing the same thing. They're taking temperature scans and, pulse oximeter readings of everybody that comes in. And, that can just be like a good practice anyway. But, when it becomes part of screening in terms of like, do you get access to this building or to the service? It's really fascinating, and like, I understand why my colleagues are doing it, because, if your livelihood depends on seeing clients, and your other clients want to know like exactly what's happening. I mean, shit, I went to get a burger today as part of our errands, and there was a woman who was picking up her food, and she was like waiting and waiting, and she had this bag, she had her food in front of her, but she was waiting and waiting and waiting. And then finally the cashier came over and was like, hey, can I help you with something? And the woman says, she was like a typical Karen. Like if you follow the internet memes, she was like a typical Karen. Can I speak to the manager, please? And she says, wait a second, like you're handling the money as a cashier, and then you're also handling the food. Like that's not safe. That's not sanitary. And the woman who was working like was awesome. She was just like, I hear you, ma'am. And between going from one to the other, like there's a hand washing station, and I wash my hands. And then I put on a new set of gloves before I do any of the food handling, and like everything is cool. And then the woman took her food and kind of stormed off. But it was just like it's amazing the lengths that people are going. That's the stores and all the things that are going around this coronavirus. So I'd love to hear from you guys. Like, hit up the show, Pleasure Points Podcast at Gmail, or hit me up on Instagram at James E. Rohr, and let me know what it's what is this opening up phase looking like for you? Have you encountered a situation where you're like, am I okay with this? Or is this just becoming the new normal? Should we fight on this? And, the beauty of the government here, right? Or of like the small businesses, they can have a choice. It's like, okay, great. You don't want your temperature scanned, like don't come in, you go get your haircut somewhere else or whatever. But it's just really interesting to see how all this plays out. And it'll be interesting too to see like what the research comes out. It reminds me of that old joke about cholesterol, where the doctor says to the guy like, "Hey, I got good news, I got bad news. The bad news is your cholesterol is the same. The good news is the research has changed." Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens with the research on this coronavirus. Is if we ever get the full picture of it. So yeah, so that's what's happening right now. And then, the other thing that's going on too, obviously, if you've got, if you're paying attention at all, is the Black Lives Matter movement. And it's been, I'm so glad to be up here with Wyatt to be able to talk to him about it and to connect. And, out of the blue the other day, he brought it up. Well, not directly. He asked the question. He said, are there any kings? Has this country ever had kings and queens? And I love to just talk, and so I took that as an opportunity to go all the way back to before the Revolutionary War, and to talk about the foundation and the history of this country, and how this country was built upon a revolution. And then he asked about, well, how did the people that found this country, like, how did they treat he was calling them, the brown people, the Native Americans, how were they treated? And so we got to talk about the atrocities that happened there. And then, it led right into this Black Lives Matter movement, and talking about, just how we have an extra responsibility as being white to make sure that we get the most out of this life, and advocate for everybody, regardless of age, gender, and color, to have the same kind of opportunities that we have, and to be able to address that. And we also had, when we were here, being up here this week, doTERRA had a leadership call where the founders of the company, had partnered up and created basically sort of a diversity, like a diversity leadership group. And so we had a beautiful hour and 20-minute call where, different Black leaders in the community were able to talk about their experiences, talk about, where doTERRA fits into it, where doTERRA can be doing better, how the essential oils fit into Black community, and, what we as, white people can do to support the cause, to be sensitive, to be aware, to be mindful. And, I decided that this would be a good conversation for Wyatt to hear. He and I were working on a puzzle while Jen was really focused on the call. But I wanted to make sure that he was hearing that, and I think I don't think you're ever too young to start having this conversation. And for all of the awkwardness or the mixed messages or the confusion as it rolled out on Instagram, which, as you guys know, is a big platform for myself and for Jen on that Blackout Tuesday, for as weird as some of like the message morphed, and it just sort of ventured into this kind of like shaming, and I don't know, that whole day and like the few days after that, Jen and I had a lot of conversations. We've, been talking a lot about this, and now that we're up here with Wyatt, I thought it was, I'm really glad to be able to have that conversation with him as well, and to allow him to hear, leaders in our community, in our doTERRA community. It's really important to us to hear how they're handling it, and to just even explain, why is this happening? Why do we have these conversations now? And how to be an advocate for people, and to speak up. If you see someone being bullied, if you see somebody making a comment about race or the color of someone's skin, to not just be silent, but to stand up. To stand up to them directly, or to reach out and tell an adult so we can intervene. And one of Wyatt's best friends is Black. And, her parents I think they're both doctors. And, I love that it's never been a thing, right? And why would it? Why should it be? But we got to explain to him that, as you get older, if things don't change, it might become more of a thing. And so, we have to be on the front lines of treating everybody with respect and kindness. And so it's really, really interesting times that we're in right now. But I'd love also to hear from you guys. Like, how are you addressing this with your kids? Are you participating in these discussions with them? I mean, one of the things in that sort of first week of that Blackout Tuesday on Instagram, and it allowed me, or it led me to start following more Black leaders and influencers and all of that. And the videos that hit me the hardest were the ones of parents talking about, the drills that they run, the Black parents talking about the drills that they run at their house with their kids, teaching them what exactly to say, if they encounter a person of authority or a police officer, to put their hands up, and what exactly to say. and then, listening to them as they share the conversations that they've had about, what happens if you, encounter authority, what happens if you feel, if you witness racism, or what happens if you, know that you're being prejudiced against, how do you handle all that? And those videos, as a parent, as a father, like just hit me the hardest, because it's like, I've never had that conversation with Wyatt. The closest thing that really that we've come to, the conversation that I have had with him, is a different type of tyranny that's not based on the color of your skin, but it's medical tyranny. And I said to him, I said, if anybody ever tries to inject you with anything without, myself or your mom or your grandparents around, you scream, you yell, you push them away if you have to, and you run away until you find a safe, an adult that can, better protect you. But you don't ever let anybody inject you with anything without, myself or your mom being there. Because, anecdotally, I've heard stories, and, I don't know what it's like. Well, I don't know what it's like to be on the receiving end of racism that leads to jail time or broken families or prejudice, but what was interesting to me in talking to Jen about some of these things is that being a white acupuncturist was interesting. Oh, I know. This came up from the doTERRA talk. So, listening to some of these leaders in doTERRA, they were talking about how, the people that they look at in the leadership magazines and the people who do really well in the business, that they don't look like them, right? It's mostly white people. And so there was a lack of Black representation in the leadership ranks. And, that was interesting, because I was thinking about it in terms of acupuncture, and it's like, oh, actually, like, I had some of that experience. Like, there weren't, when I was in school 20 years ago, like, there weren't that many acupuncturists that looked like me and that had the sort of the educational background that I had, before acupuncture school. But still, there were some, right? And some of my teachers were just like old white guys. But that was interesting. And like throughout my career, especially early on, this would have been in like the mid 2000s, people would be like, wait, you're not, they'd book an appointment, and I'd answer the door when they'd come in, and they'd be like, well, you're not Chinese. You're not Chinese. I must have heard that probably, I don't know, 100 times in my practice. Like, you're not Chinese. Or they call and, then they hear me talk and there's no accent. They're like, you're not Chinese. And it's like, well, does it matter? Like, no kidding. But does it matter? Like, so, that's like the closest that I've come. And again, it's like, it's not even close. It's like, it's another galaxy apart. But having received like that experience, like, had I not been in acupuncture school, I don't know that, or become an acupuncturist, like, if I just been like a lawyer, I would have never been confronted with multiple experiences like that, where somebody's just completely judging you based on race and culture, And I've definitely, it's funny because it would come up, like, I'd be in an Uber, or like I'd be talking to someone at a party, and they would even say to my face, they would just be like, oh, I would never go to a white person for acupuncture. Like, I only go to Chinatown, or I will only want to be with someone who's Chinese because I want like the real deal. It's like you realize you're talking to me, right? Like, I am the white acupuncturist that you are completely profiling based on race and culture. That's funny. I haven't thought about that example in a while. Yeah, it's funny. I have the privilege of laughing again, because this is another phrase that's popular right now. That was a very microaggression. And listen, I don't want a client that doesn't want to be treated by me anyway. But that's the closest that I've come, and I'm grateful that, like that Louis C.K. joke, as a white man, you could be put in a time machine and dropped at anywhere at any point in history, and chances are, like, we'd be fine, and that's the truth of it. So to be able to have this time with Wyatt, and to talk to him about it, and to mentor him, and to explain, with power comes responsibility, and we've got to be able to usher in a new era where everybody can be respectful and honoring what's happened before, and where we might be going. So I'd love to hear again how you guys are handling these conversations. Jen has a friend who's Black who wrote a kid's book where the main characters are Black. And, I know we bought a bunch of those, for ourselves and to pass them out to daycare. And, I love the idea also of like, going out and supporting Black businesses and making it a point to find those businesses. I mean, look, small businesses need our love right now. Like there's no two ways about it. Like small businesses need our love and they need our dollars in particular. So getting out and supporting small business, but especially, Black-owned businesses, I think is a fantastic way to contribute to making a difference. And, of course, there's all sorts of other programs and ideas. And, my old client, Gabrielle Union, she also has a new kids book out that looks amazing. I haven't ordered it yet, but, that looks amazing. And, again, like starting early, teaching, just exposing kids to different colors of people and, letting the doctors and the surgeons and the lawyers be people of color, so that we don't have to unlearn, that the racism that I certainly grew up with, and some of I'm aware of the prejudices that just sort of pop up in my head that I have to consciously look at and, decide that I'm not going to believe and buy into. And it's been a phenomenal time in the last couple of weeks for me anyway, of reprogramming some of that, of really shining a light on, what is some of that internal dialogue? Are some of these just automatic assumptions that I have when looking at, people of color, especially Black people. And it's uncomfortable to admit that, like, I definitely have like racist tendencies. I mean, I don't even know if that's the right word. There's so many words that I don't even know what the thing is, but like, I'm aware of thoughts that I'm not proud of that pop up like before a conscious thought. They're just like, it shows up, it's there. And I like to think that I've never consciously acted on any of it. And that I've treated, all people with respect and kindness. But the fact that those associations are even in me, it's not hard to imagine where it came from, right? I look at my dad, I look at, my grandfather and it's like we can see where these influences come from. And so I think that us, taking a stand as parents and just having the conversations and explaining, what's going on in the world, what you might be seeing and just how to show up as good people is time well spent. So again, I always love hearing from you guys. Hit me up, pleasurepointspodcast@gmail.com, on Instagram @JamesE Rohr. Let me know, what you guys are doing, how are you addressing these conversations. And, this is the beginning, hopefully, of the end of an era where, we can all just kind of come together and lead with love and just take care of each other. So thank you guys, as always, for being here, and we will catch you next time. Bye.